I guess I'll start. First of all,
Yes.
my name is Terry Cornell. I'm the president of AHP. I'm also an enrolled member of the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe of Oklahoma. I'm a Arapaho. My family comes from Oklahoma. I live in Chicago. I want to open this meeting up with a quick prayer. I pray that we all have some healthy dialogue, learn from each other, and help heal the past. I'll hand it over to Margaret.
Yes, I'm Margaret Mary Moore, and I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I'll hand it to Alyssa.
Hi, I'm Alyssa. I'm adopted Mohawk and I live in Ohio. Now it's Ray and Sue's turn.
Good morning. We are Sue and Ray Martell.
And we live on an island in the Salish Sea, not far from Seattle. And we are authors, editors, and research people on the AHP committee. And next is Deacon Larry.
You're muted, Deacon Larry.
Sorry about that. I'm Deacon Larry, a Northeastern Woodlands Native American. I'm currently serving in the Diocese of Charleston, South Carolina. And I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished speaker, Father Mike Carson. Father Mike serves as the Assistant Director of the Secretariat of Cultural Diversity in the Church at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. In his role at the USCCB's Native American Office, Father Carson has been instrumental in fostering dialogue and understanding between the Catholic Church and Indigenous communities. Today, Father Carson will guide us through your owner's guide to keeping Christ's sacred promise, a pastoral framework for Indigenous ministry. This framework represents a significant commitment by the Church to strengthen its relationship with Native American Catholics and communities. Father Carson brings a wealth of experience in cross-cultural ministry and has been particularly dedicated to advancing Indigenous Catholic ministry throughout the United States. He has worked extensively to develop and implement the pastoral framework, which aims to address the spiritual and cultural needs of Native American Catholics while honoring their rich traditions and heritage. Please join me in welcoming Father Mike Carson.
Thank you, Deacon Larry. Thank you very much. I'm going to try to see if I can screen share here. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. Okay. First of all, I'm going to show up. I want to show my book. Hopefully everybody has this. This is what we're going to talk about, although it's reversed. It's $10.95. So it's kind of just one trip to Starbucks, and it's very good to have. Hopefully it'll last for another 35 years or 40 years. And I know some dioceses are bought these things for everybody who ministers with Native Americans in their diocese. And again, it's a good handbook to have. And this is what we're going to go over today. We're going to go over this book. And then if you try to find it, just again, OSV, just type in Native Americans, or you can go to my website and get the QR code, and that should work too. Okay. Again, we're just going to go over the book itself. I have three things I want to accomplish through my talk. First, I want to present a brief history and a brief presentation of exactly what's inside the major points of the pastoral framework for Indigenous ministry. I will focus on how we got there, how we got this document together, and especially we're going to focus on the boarding schools because it's been on a lot of people's mind throughout these years. So we're going to focus some on that. And then I'll spend some time on how to use this framework, especially for those who want to develop a pastoral plan for their own diocese, archdiocese, or their particular Catholic Indigenous communities. We want to take what's in our national framework and apply it locally, because that's what the framework is actually designed to, is to work for you to present it and work with it in a local environment. Okay. So first step. As soon as I get this thing to work. There we go. Origins. How did this pastoral framework come about? At first, it required a lot of work, I should know, because I've been working on it for the last 7 years. But in understanding this document, well, first of all, have to understand that this is the bishop's approach to Native American ministry. And it's important to look at what changes with the bishops. As I said, I've been on my job for the last 8 years. I've really seen a change, kind of a paradigm shift with the bishops. For most of the Catholic Church, it was the bishops who saying, hey, we know exactly what Catholic natives need, and then they apply it, which of course is not very good. But from when I've been on the subcommittee as a staff, we worked very hard to do the listening, of saying that we do not have all the ideas, all the plans, all the stuff that makes Native ministry work. What we're going to do is first step is to listen to Native Catholic natives, especially their leadership, and then work with them to develop their own way forward for this ministry. I think my early years here, that famous Catholic native said, hey, Father Mike, not another plan from USCCB. To wit, they didn't want us to develop plans because they know exactly what they need and how to do it. They just wanted our help from the bishops to make sure that it is national in terms of how to help them out. So that's what not only myself has been working with, but it's also the bishops on the subcommittee. I think we've had now 3 going on to our 3rd chair, but it really has been a kind of a pressure, but a priority for the bishops to do a lot of listening. So I think that's where the pastoral framework comes about, is that listening. It is clearly a marriage between the bishops and also Catholic Native leaders. And a lot of Catholic Native leaders really have put their heart and soul into this document. And of course, so has the bishops. Okay, the physical origin of the document comes from 2017. I was involved with this. So was Father Henry Sands from Black Indian Mission Office. We got together and said what we really need is to get all the major Catholic natives together throughout the country in one place, get the bishops there, and even not only the bishops of the subcommittee, but the bishops also for those who have large populations of Native Catholics in their diocese or archdiocese, get them there too. So we can have an important dialogue. This dialogue lasted for a week. Someone on the call here was part of that dialogue. So we began this dialogue and figure out, hey, Catholic Natives leaders, what do you want? What should we be working on? Not only for the subcommittee, but the entire Roman Catholic Church. So that was the origin of this framework, because one of the things they wanted was a framework or a pastoral plan, a national pastoral plan. The last one was done in 1977. And of course, a lot of things are different since 1977. And even the 1977 document was only, 8 pages. So it really was not in depth. And it just covered the basics of what was important from the bishops in 1977. So we take that as our starting point, but most importantly, the origins of this pastoral framework really begin with our important Phoenix Dialogue in 2017. And they developed not only what they wanted to see in a pastoral framework or a pastoral plan, but especially how to implement it and ways to implement it. So that becomes a very important process. I don't know if we had talked about it earlier, but if you guys have any questions, we're going to wait till after my presentation, and I'll do my best to answer this presentation. So just after the presentation, so just put your questions in the chat. I think Margaret Mary is going to gather them together, and we'll talk about some of your questions or try to answer some of your questions after my presentation. Okay, let's go on. What's in a name? The name, of course, is keeping Christ's sacred promise. And this name was actually suggested by some of the Native leadership, Catholic Native leadership. And the key idea here is the promise. Now, it actually comes from the scripture passage. It comes from the Acts of the Apostles 2:39. And this passage comes at the very end of Christ's ministry, at the very beginning of the Acts of the Apostles. And Christ is walking along with his apostles, and he talks about promise. Say, hey, I give you this promise, not only to you, but for your generation. And the promise is linked very much to salvation. Christ says, hey, you walk my path, you do my words, you keep my commandments, and the promise that I give you is salvation, not only for you, but then key to those who are far off, which means everybody. It means even across the ocean. It means everybody. That's a key to this promise of salvation. Now, a lot of things go into the promise of salvation. It's just not, God's going to promise to lead us to salvation, but it's the idea that the Roman Catholic Church has a mission and ministry to do that, to help keep that promise of salvation. That's kind of our action words. This is what we're going to do as a church. We're going to wrap ourselves into the promise of salvation so that can be kept. However, promise is also a very important idea in Catholic in Native cultures. And I just have a quote from Chief Red Cloud, and it's kind of a famous quote. He said, "They made us many promises, more than I can remember, but they kept only one. They promised to take our land, and they did." So it's kind of the idea of broken promises, always through, not only for Red Cloud and Lakota, but throughout Indian country, throughout tribes and Indian groups, is that idea of constantly breaking promises. It says we promise one thing and we do something else. And that has led to historical trauma, which I'll get into a little later in the presentation. But that's why we want to emphasize the word of promise, that we have certain promises in the Roman Catholic Church, and we have to do everything we can, everything in our DNA to make sure those promises are kept. And those promises eventually, of course, lead to salvation, but those promises are very, very important to us. And then we're going to work with those promises to make sure that we can build that trust or rebuild that trust with our Catholic Native community, even Natives themselves. The title of the document, Keeping Christ's Promises, is a statement the Catholic Church is committed to do better than it has done in the past. The bishops especially know what the promises toward work toward salvation is a joint partnership with all Native communities, will not be a top-down process, but a process of dialogue and working together. That's all in the name of promises. It's the idea that we're going to work together to move everybody to the promise of salvation. That is kind of a joint partnership with our Native communities, especially our Native Catholic communities, and the bishops and the entire Roman Catholic Church. Okay. Continuing. First part is part one, call for healing. If you have your book, then go ahead and follow along. You notice that part one, this actually a statue is St. Caritacwitha in front of the cathedral at Santa Fe. Okay, although this pastoral framework is primarily written with Native voices and Native narrative, let's keep in mind it's a bishop's document. It was passed by 2/3 of all the bishops, not just the Latin Rite, but also the Eastern Rite. All those passed by 2/3. So therefore, it is a document, an official document of the Roman Catholic Church. So when you go to visit your bishop or archbishop with your document in hand, you can quote from it and say, these are your words. These are words that you voted on. These are words that our Roman Catholic Church. These are official words. So therefore, it's important for all bishops and archbishops to act on these words. This is the voice of the bishops, and therefore is what every bishop has agreed to carry out. The authority of the document is the authority of the Roman Catholic Church in the United States. And then right at the beginning, we begin with saints. Why do we put saints in the introduction? The native and non-native saints and holy individuals are set a tone for the document throughout the document. This tone is grounded as to the very beginning of the document on what it means to be holy. So we talk about the saints and the holy men, both native and non-native, as this is exactly what it means to be holy. We match our behavior, especially in our Roman Catholic Church. We try to match our behavior to all those who have gone before us, who we can say these are individuals who actions and work is holy, is spiritual, is glorious. We're going to do the same with our own lives. So that's why we start off with all these holy individuals. We also not only put the saints at the very beginning, but we also put the importance of healing and reconciliation right in the introduction. The reason why we do that, and I've said this before, is again another quote from a native leader from the time that I started, and then they said that we cannot go forward with anything dealing with Native ministry until we deal with the boarding schools. If we do a deal with boarding schools, not only have an apology, but then the work behind that apology, then we can move Native ministry forward. We can't do anything until we do that at a national level. So that's put a high priority on healing and reconciliation as a first and foremost point of what we need to do, especially at the national level. And the bishops of the subcommittee have really embraced this and say, hey, healing, reconciliation of the boarding schools and other trauma that the Catholic Church has caused needs to be dealt with first and foremost before this ministry can go forward. Okay. Historical trauma. From the introduction, the document addresses some of the greatest challenges facing Catholic natives and natives in general. The document addresses not only historical trauma, but the way in which the trauma can be deliberative or can be destructive to Native communities. The underlying consequences of not only the devastating loss of population, but also of the willful destruction of Native cultures and especially the resilience of Native cultures and people has resulted in their traumatic history. That's all part of the first section of our pastoral framework. Is to talk both about the causes and the problems with historical trauma, but also talks about the results, both bad and good. And the good is the resilience of Native peoples throughout the United States. This resilience, spirit, and strength is example not only the Catholic Church in the U.S., but also to the world. As we celebrate the resilience of Native populations and Native peoples, we do not minimize or diminish the role the Catholic Church has played in this historical Native trauma, and especially assault on Native cultures. In this way, the document seeks to use the Native strength, resilience to fortify faith and the spiritual lives of Native Catholics without diminishing the Church's co-ability, which is very important. So we'll hold both of these. We'll hold, yes, we celebrate that resilience, and we can use that resilience for faith, but we don't want to use that as kind of a idea of reducing our Church's co-ability or the problems our Church has caused, especially with the attack on Native cultures. So I want to hold both of those. Further, this section touches on devastating consequences of trauma within Native communities and what can be done. However, the vibrancy and vitality of Native cultures is not limited to the consequence of trauma. Native cultures have the foundation of faith and spirituality, which is the foundation of their ability to transcend historical trauma and the resulting devastations inflicted on Native cultures and families. So we want to make sure that we match the resilience and getting through Native traumas with the idea of spirituality and holiness as being a very strong part of most Native cultures. The last of this first part of the pastoral framework addresses the response to historical trauma is not limited to Native communities themselves, but because of it has a problem with, or it has a solution and work by a larger society. Since the larger society had a hand in causing this historical trauma, by definition, the larger society has an equal responsibility to help alleviate the consequences of this historical trauma. Okay. We'll go on to quality of perseverance, which is very important, as I talked about before. This section delves deeper into Native spiritualities, the greater gift of what Native cultures are to the church, the starting point on how to enhance Native cultures within the church. The Pastoral framework puts the emphasis not only on dialogue with Native communities, but also the vital importance of making sure Native themselves chart their own way forward. This goes back to the idea of listening. We're going to listen to Native communities, especially Catholic communities. We're going to work together to chart a way forward. This empowerment is crucial, not only developing ways to enhance the Native liturgical experience, but the transformation aspect of the mission of the church as well. So when we do this dialogue, we're not only going to talk about liturgy as the first and foremost of what we do as a church, but also in a wider perspective, we're going to use Native cultures and the important parts of Native cultures to transform the wider church or wider society. It's important to underscore that this different way of doing things, that is listening and understanding what Native leadership have said and want, is a work of the Catholic Church. Natives themselves know what their concerns are, what they need, and who can help. This nodal process is not only far more effective than what has gone on in the past, but the process of listening to Natives also goes a long way restoring that trust with the church. Not only does the Pastoral framework weave this thread of listening to and respecting Catholic Natives throughout the entire document, but it's throughout its formation, how it came into being. It is also part and parcel of the Bishop's Subcommittee on Native American Affairs to make sure Catholic Natives leadership, their concerns are voiced and are heard. Further, this part of the Pastoral framework underlies the importance of enculturation within the Native communities and in the church. This initiative to enculturate is a responsibility of the entire church, just not of the subcommittee. Enculturation only works in dialogue with the other communities. The church holds on to what is common to all cultures throughout time, but also embraces symbols, rituals, and meanings that are wholly different to holy communities. The idea, and we'll talk more about liturgy a little later, but as I said before, and I've done presentations on liturgy before, and I talk about how our documents of the church mandates enculturation of liturgy. It's just not a good idea, but it's a mandate of our church to make sure our liturgies match the people in the pews. And the other thing I also talked about is all liturgies. Every single liturgy that we do is culturally specific. And we have to make sure, again, if we're doing a liturgy, we're doing a Holy Mass, make sure that Mass is corresponding to the culture that the Mass is in. And we have to not think about a Mass as being outside of culture. Every single Mass that we do is culturally based. And again, we'll have to make sure rightly we can't do things that are not approved of by the documents of our church. But if we do good enculturation, that helps people, bring people in the church. And again, it's kind of reverence the culture. Okay, let's go on to number 2, call to mission. In this section of Pastoral, the document begins with a look at historical missionaries and holy men and women that have shaped Catholic Native ministry in our country. Also, examination of what is true and authentic missionary activity is like. From the early missionaries, we learn the most important foundation of proclaiming the word of God is a deep and abiding respect to Native cultures and Native peoples. Without respect, missionaries might fall in the trap of his or her own cultural superiority, something we want to avoid, not only in the past, but especially today, is the idea of cultural superiority. There is a positive tone set by this introductory chapters that proclaim Native Catholics as a great gift to the church. Not a burden, not a problem, but a gift. And that gift mindset is an important mindset to go, especially when you deal with Native cultures, is to take, this is not a burden, this is not an obstacle to overcome, but we first of all see Native cultures as a great gift, not only to Native ministry, but also to our Roman Catholic Church. The celebration of this giftedness, celebration of all of the church. Proclamation of the word of God is both the duty of the missionary today and in the past, but it's also a duty of those who receive it, to embrace it and share it. Great missionaries have three things in common. They know that the Holy Spirit has gone before them. They're always in dialogue with their communities that they're working with, and they come to the attitude of servant. And I'll talk about those three things just very briefly, because they're very, very important. People who want to do missionary work in Native communities have to have those three things. If one of those things are missing, then their missionary abilities is considerably diminished, and they can do great destruction in what people they're ministering with. First, we have to get rid of the idea that missionaries are for Native cultures. And our documents of the church make it very clear that every baptized Catholic is called to be a missionary, okay? No matter where we find ourselves, no matter where we are missionaries. And that missionary zeal is very important. When I help out at a church here in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., I reminded myself that I'm here to convert the pagans in Washington, D.C. And there's a lot of pagans here, and they need to be converted. And that's why I have that idea of missionary zeal. So it's not just I'm going to work with Native communities as a missionary, or go overseas, or work in Madagascar or Mongolia. Every single place we find ourselves, we are called to be missionary. We have to call that missionary zeal, which is very important. But for the Native communities, we have these four aspects. First, we have to have the idea that the Native communities are spiritual, and they've always been spiritual for tens of thousands of years. That the Spirit of God was working with Native communities long before Columbus. I've said that the Holy Spirit was not a stowaway on Columbus' ship. That did not happen. The Holy Spirit was well established here when Columbus arrived. Now, the Roman Catholic Church is going to shape that into a faith in Christ, but we have to have the idea that the Holy Spirit, the spiritualities of Native communities are alive and well before Columbus. And when the Europeans, when they got off the ship, are not going to give anything to the Native communities, but we're going to explore the Holy Spirit together. That's very important, that the missionaries do not give anything to people that they work with, and quite the opposite, that we work to find Christ together as missionaries. Native ministry, like all being a disciple, a missionary disciple, is a dialogue. It's not a one. I'm not just going to speak to the people I minister with. There's going to be a dialogue back and forth, because we're going to find Christ together. So it's important to make sure that there's a dialogue or speaking. So it's not the pastor saying, "I'm now in the church and now you guys do what I want." That's not the way it works. We bring people together and we have a dialogue of exactly how we can be work together and find Christ together. Aspects of Native spirituality can and should be used in prayer and liturgy. As I talked before, the documents make it very clear in our Roman Catholic Church that enculturization, not only in liturgy, but also in prayer, is a mandate. It's not a good thing to do if we get time to do it, or perhaps we'll get around to it. It's a mandate of our Roman Catholic Church to do enculturization of the Roman liturgy and do prayers, as well, of course, doing it the right way, but it's a mandate of our church. We keep that in mind. And last, natives need to be given authority in decisions that affect them. And I've been proclaiming this a long time for any organization that has any authority over Native communities, that they really have to be run or even encompass natives themselves. Along part of our destructive history is not allowing natives to be part of and decision-making of things that affect them. And that's very destructive. So if we're going to have decisions that affect them, they're going to be brought in to make those decisions with us or make decisions by themselves, that becomes very important. If we don't do that, if we exclude natives themselves from any decision-making process, then we're on a path of destruction. I think that's one of the great concerns of the boarding school period, is that we excluded natives from any decision-making. And perhaps if we did not do that, if we invited natives to make decision-making, then perhaps we would not have the boarding school period, or destruction of the boarding school period. Okay. Going on. Part 3, call for reconciliation. Well, the first part of this part of our pastoral framework quotes Pope Francis. It's in need of being watchful willingness to combat injustices against natives. This is all of our responsibility, especially church. This vehemence and vigilance are especially needed because of different attempts to marginalize Native Indigenous communities, not just by the Roman Catholic Church, but by our larger society. In the recently held International Conference on Indigenous and Catholic Indigenous, also called the ICCI, that was in September of 2024, we found, working with Indigenous from around the world, we found the same concerns, especially in terms of social justice. Among those concerns that Indigenous in 4 countries, in Canada, US, New Zealand, and Australia, they have racism, poor and missing housing, low access to education, and high poverty levels. So this is actually the same in all those 4 countries. So there's that common theme. And from the results of our listening session, the gathering of the national Catholic leaders in Phoenix, as we talked about before, it was a pivotal moment in Native history. It was the first time that Catholic Native leaders with the bishop developed a long-term path forward in ministry and cooperation. Most of the issues concerning the action items coming forth from this gathering, the Phoenix Summit was the seed planted that grew into a multi-layered response to this very important Catholic community. The idea here is, I just don't want to give the idea that the listening session Phoenix just had the result of the subcommittee, but also had results with the Bureau of Indian Missions, the American Catholic Indian Schools Network, a lot of national organizations, the Technical Conference, all had different results from this Phoenix listening session. There we go, healing. Okay, healing. Because Catholic Native boarding schools is such a central part in Catholic Native relations, which felt the entire section of the framework be devoted to this boarding school in a comprehensive manner. The foundation of this chapter was the response of the Catholic boarding school letter of Archbishop Coakley and Bishop Wall, way back when, even after the Phoenix session, before the pastoral framework, when there was such great concern that Bishop Wall, who was head of the subcommittee, and Archbishop Coakley was then head of Domestic Social Justice Committee, they got together, of course, with staff. And the problem that I brought to them was from Catholic leaders say, hey, Mike, we just don't need an apology. To which they're saying, hey, an apology is fine, but what's more important is action, is items, is what we need to do to back up this apology. They don't want to say, hey, I'm sorry, and nothing more to be done. It's kind of placation. So I got a lot of heat from some media who said, well, USCCB has not apologized for the boarding school period. I tried to explain to them that many Catholic Native leaders didn't want an apology. They're far more interested in the steps leading to an apology, concrete actions that we at the USCCB, but especially at a national level, can do to back up said apology. They want actions on the ground. They want footsteps. They want marching orders. They don't just want an apology to be placated and nothing else is done. So they said, hey, do these action items, put them in place, and then after you've done that, then come up with apology, because the apology would mean something rather than just have an apology to placate the concerns of natives. So that's what we did. And the first, of course, is this letter. And it in the pastoral framework talks about the 4 areas of our action items. But this letter is kind of a unified action of our Roman Catholic Church, of everybody working on these 4 areas. So it's every Catholic church, every diocese, archdiocese, parish, and lay people have an action plan to work together in unison for helping reconciliation and healing. However, the church's response is only as great as the response of those who are in the church want to do with it. If the bishops don't want to latch on to the letter and the action items, then there's not much we at the USCCB can do. But we can only have moral authority to say, hey, this is really what the Native community really wants, and this is what we have to work on. In order for the church's national action items to move forward, there has to be a buy-in to all those involved, especially the diocese and archdiocese and at the parish level. Our 4 aspects of our national plan go beyond an apology, helps to focus all our work was best to foster reconciliation and healing. These 4 aspects are chosen because they can be applied to every tribe and every situation. Okay. Family. This section of the pastoral framework is focused on the family, especially what makes a family a strong value in Native cultures and the Catholic Church. The framework connects the ability to survive historical trauma as both a cause of family breakdown, but also strength of family unity. So historical trauma breaks down the family, and this surviving historical trauma has the ability to increase faith and also build up the family. One of the most important factors that helps Native families become stronger through past and present trauma that it faces is relying on faith and spirituality. A structure not only helps families, but also our Roman Catholic Church. So we have all these problems and difficulties caused by historical trauma, and then as we help with that historical trauma, problem and difficulties that it causes, it not only increases the Catholic faith presence with natives, but also helps them heal, and it builds up our Roman Catholic Church, not only just for Native communities, but the entire church in general. The church is also both an institution that helps families and been an instrument in harming families, especially through the boarding schools, as I talked about earlier. The church provides the strength through the sacraments and has focused families in love, compassion, and forgiveness of Christ. However, the boarding school period and the associated historical trauma the church has inflicted brings sorrow and destruction to the same families. This is one of the most important aspects of our framework, to work to build up on what helps a family and reconcile the church's past sins against families and help start the healing process. Okay, part 4, Call to Holiness. This part talks about the sacraments and, of course, what and Native spiritualities and the importance of they are to not only the Native communities, but also the Roman Catholic Church. In this section, the pastoral framework briefly is focused on the area between spirituality and cultures, spiritualities and cultures, and how they're manifest in the Catholic Church for prayer and liturgy. The needs and concerns of Catholic natives in liturgy are expressed through the lens of what has worked and what is to be avoided. The pastoral framework also highlights the way Native inculturization is both necessary and how it can be accomplished. Worship. This 4th section of the framework turns toward the subject of liturgy and prayer. This is the introduction, the section that points out why liturgy and prayer has been important, not only for Native communities in the present age, but also in the past, an important factor in the lives and spiritual lives. The Holy Spirit was alive and active throughout the New World. The church bases all its work on that foundational reality, the idea that Native communities are spiritual and holy, and that we base our Roman Catholic Church on that very important foundation. Further, we recognize the great gift that Native spiritualities bring to the church. The challenge is not necessarily stress the superiority of the Roman rite or divine within Native communities, but how the church promotes proper enculturation in prayer and liturgy to bring about its fullness. So the idea of enculturation has one single focus, and that is to bring about the revelation of Christ, of the Paschal mystery, of death and resurrection and salvation, and for the communities. And the best way, in fact, the only way to do that is enculturation, not only with liturgy, but also with all types of prayer. Okay, moving right along. Sacred music. What makes music sacred? First, we have tradition and culture. The songs that we use at Mass should uplift the assembly and underscore what is going on at the Mass. All songs are culturally based, just as I said before. All liturgy is culturally based, but if you pick a song, all songs you pick has a connection to culture. And if you're only picking European songs or Western European songs, and you're doing it with a native community, then see there's that mismatch. And that mismatch we want to avoid, because we have that mismatch, it does not bring people into spirituality or holiness or even into the church. The songs chosen at Mass need to have meaning of what is important to those who participate in liturgy. Not just songs that the presider or liturgical coordinator think might work. Again, it goes back to dialogue, finding out what songs in our native communities work, what songs are related to holy, and then understand, of course, what the church preaches in terms of music. Second, the instruments used needs to also be culturally based. Instruments that are foreign to culture bring the people away from Christ and are a distraction. Now, this is very important because there's not such thing as pan-Indian cultures. There's not one Indian culture throughout the United States. There are many, many different cultures and I worked for some 8 years with the Navajo. The Navajo are very different than the Hopi or the Pueblo, and they're right next door because they have different traditions, they have different origins and different histories. And instruments or songs that work with the Navajo are not going to work with the Hopi. So if you have like the Gila River and Salt River Reservation, and you have Plains River instruments, it's not going to work because the natives in that part of the region, it's in the eastern part of Phoenix, they use a rattle. They don't use drums, and they bring in drums that's foreign to their culture. So it's kind of keep in mind. That is why dialogue is so important with the natives you work with and understand their spiritualities, especially not only with music, but also with instruments. Studies have shown that there are 3 aspects of Mass that will help people to return to the church. 1, hospitality. 2, preaching. And 3, music. And they're all culturally based. But we don't spend time, effort, and resources in those 3, then we'll not have a vibrant and growing church. But first and foremost is to understand those 3, and especially how to do it in a culturally appropriate way. Conscious of my time here, so I'm going to go and skip some of this. There's more of this in the pastoral framework, but I noticed I have only 10 more minutes, so I'm going to move on to some social issues. Okay, social issues. This is the last part of the framework. Native social issues has long been focus of the Catholic Church. It is written extensively in the first pastoral statement in 1977. Las Casas has also written, even at the very beginning of the missionary period, social issues and concerns have been an integral part of our Roman Catholic Church, beginning with Las Casas, who, as I understand, is on the path for sainthood. Catholic social teaching embraces many of the concerns that connect with some of the most important obstacles of native life, whether it be strengthening the family, programs to reduce suicide, and the importance of housing, the bishops want to make clear that they are a central part of their work. Not only the bishops on the subcommittee of Native American Affairs, but all bishops of the Roman Catholic Church. Most of the section of the social issues comes from the recommendations of the Summit Against Native Poverty held at Notre Dame University in South Bend, Indiana. This is where we gathered some 40 leaders in their field on different aspects of Native poverty and what to do about it. So it's not only understanding what causes Native poverty, but it's put the action forward for the Roman Catholic Church to find solutions to Native poverty. I think that was 2020, I believe. Okay, so let's go through some of them really quickly. Natural resources. Land. Its use and how it's managed plays a central role in many Native lives. Studies conclude that the Pastoral framework shows that Native communities are more likely to be threatened by changes in land or environment than any other cultural family. This dependence on land fosters the spirituality that embraces Mother Earth, but also puts in peril the well-being of many Native communities that need to adjust to changing realities such as climate change. Adding this concern is that many Native communities might lack the resources to bounce back from the increasing natural disasters caused by climate and environmental changes. Saint Caterina is a patron saint of ecology. In this role, she is a reminder that one of core spiritual concerns and connections with many Native communities is a special relationship with the land. This thousands of years of relationship is put into jeopardy when land environment issues become separated from our faith. Furthermore, one of the great gifts of the Roman Catholic communities, the Native communities, is the connection between faith and the environment. It is a faith that leads to action to protect the environment for future generations. Changing environment. Out of all culture groups, Native communities are the most susceptible to the changing environment for these 4 reasons. 1, many Native communities get their income from land, such as farming and ranching. 2, there's not a lot of spare funds from tribes to deal with increasing natural disasters caused by climate change. 3, the infrastructure is not present to cope with changing climate. So you have a lot of poor roads and resources and power and utilities, and because they're poor to begin with, even slight climate change puts a stress on what is limited to begin with. Many reservations are located on land that is particularly vulnerable to flooding, drought, and wildfires. And we've seen that over the last couple of years. When there's ever a natural disaster, it seems that the Native communities are the most affected. Housing and access to finances. Okay, well, I've used this question before other non-Native groups. I've asked them, okay, you go off to the bank and you want to get a loan for your business or for your house. How do you do that? Was the first question the bank's going to ask you. How do you secure the loan? What land do you own in order for us to do that? Unfortunately, with many reservations, they're on government land, and they can't use that land because they don't own it for collateral. So therefore, they cannot get a loan for their house or for their small business. And that becomes a problem, and it only leads to the concerns of poverty. That's why we have to be really creative in finding ways to make sure Natives have the money, the finances, the funds available to do what they want, to build their house, to own their house, or even to own their small business. The other aspects of closed cycle poverty continue unemployment or underemployment. The land that many Native tribes are forced to occupy has been the worst land for development. If natural resources are found, often Native tribes will be forced off the land once again, or outsiders will develop the land, leaving very little for Native communities. One of the key treaty obligations is the well-being of many Native communities. These obligations by the federal government often include development for the well-being of Natives and continued support of Native communities. Because of the unique nature of the institutions that are tasked with these objectives, there needs to be a creative approach, the fundamental Catholic value of promoting dignity and human life. So we have these, of course, these great social justice ideas of the Roman Catholic Church, and now we have to find creative ways to adapt them to our Roman Catholic native realities. Education. In this section, we looked at the most important cause of poverty as lack of educational opportunities. There are 6 reasons that many native schools are not able to bridge a gap for educational opportunities, to job or career advancement. For many teachers, the placement in schools that's located in remote areas, rural areas, they're not eager to take that assignment. They much rather have schools on cities which have more things to do rather than being in remote areas. Also, because low tax base, many schools are underfunded and even lack the basics. Further, there are overlapping jurisdictions that make it hard for schools to work together. There are government schools, tribal schools, religious schools, and they all have different administrations. There's also ways and problems are some teachers, they lower their expectations in dealing with Native students. And that's a concern that both the American Catholic and the Schools Network has really tried to deal with, because actually a path to racism is when you treat Anglo kids different than Native kids, and something to be aware of, even in a subconscious level, to make sure your expectations for Native kids are as high as other kids that you work with. And of course, getting parent involvement is always difficult, especially when people are spread far out. These 6 reasons do not apply to all Native communities, but they act together to hamper the educational system, be a block to Native children going on to higher learning. Healthcare. This section is on social concerns. The framework briefly introduces the vast topic of medical care. Most of the medical care for the natives is through the federal government agency called Indian Health Service. And those who work with Native communities, especially on the reservations, know about the IHS. They're responsible for providing federal health to American Indians, Alaskan Natives, and the IHS provides a comprehensive health service delivery system.
Very strong. The dentist told me I could eat by 2:35.
For American Indians and Alaskan Natives. They try to work not only Natives, individuals, but communities and tribes as well. Like many government agencies, they are constantly underfunded and short-staffed. Medical care is one of the role and responsibilities of the federal government. It's part of the group responsibility for taking, if the federal government takes land from Natives, then in turn, they have certain responsibilities for them to maintain. One of them is security, but most important is health care. And if they don't maintain health care or a certain level of health care, then they're negating one of their responsibilities. Racism. The Pastoral framework also focuses not only causes of Native racism, but the damage that racism causes Native communities. And the damage is unemployment, education, self-identity, and a pessimistic outlook, all problems with racism. And the racism is a problem with the wider society. When I go to Anglo communities, I ask them, talking about media, movies, and television, and how Natives are represented. I ask them, how many, and raise your hands, please, how many people have seen Natives portrayed as astronauts, sports heroes, lawyers, or doctors? Practically nobody raises their hand. Okay, I understand that. Because all Natives have all been all of those. How many people have seen Natives as criminals, organized crime people, people who are not intelligent? And everybody raises their hand. That's how media portrays Natives, and that's endemic of our society. And that gets to especially the young of seeing themselves. And all that has to be a battle, has to be eliminated in order for racism to be to accomplish, especially the effects of racism. I'm getting a little overtime, but that's all right. The Pastoral framework also points out most Natives do not live on reservations, but in urban areas. 1/3 of natives live on reservations, 2/3 of natives live in urban areas. So therefore, the pastoral framework in the social justice section talks about the increased need to increase our outlook and outreach and help to natives in urban areas, especially those urban areas that have large native populations. Evangelization, just briefly, as most of the repeat. For evangelization to take place, there need to be a native led, 2, enculturation at all levels, 3, listening, especially to native leadership, and last is respect. Okay, conclusion of the pastoral framework. This conclusion, they give 17 action steps. This is what to do. And I'm working with the Native, the Subcommittee of Native American Affairs, and also with Native leadership to prioritize these 17 steps, because of course we can't do them all. So some things are important, some things are not important. So we're going to talk about how do we do that. How do we work with the next steps in order to our pastoral framework, in order to do what's achievable, and again to prioritize what we're going to do with our pastoral framework, and how do we incorporate it and move it forward, especially in working with diocese and archdiocese. Okay, that's my presentation. I'm not going to really talk about doctrine of discovery because we really don't have time, but we'll stop its sharing here. And if anybody wants to talk about doctrine of discovery, please call me or email me and we'll talk more about that. But I'm way out of time. Okay, I'll give it over back to Margaret.
Thanks, Father Mike. We need to know how to get that book. Is it, should we order it through USCCB bookstore or our local Catholic store? Are they out in our local Catholic bookstores?
Yeah, it's probably not out in your local Catholic bookstores. It's probably, it needs to be special ordered. I order it from OSV, our Sunday visitors. They're the ones who are publishing it, and I do have a QR code on my website. If but just go to your search engine, type in OSV, and when it comes up, just type in Native American, and this cute little book will show up. And you can order it for $10.95. That's my plug.
Great. I want to make sure everybody could get a hold of it and take it to your
OSV.
parishes. And our Sunday visitor, osv.org or
I
com.
think it's yeah, I think it's .org, but I could be wrong.
Okay, well, thank you so much. There's a few questions here, and I just want to say to everybody, we want to respect your time, but we're going to stay and go a little bit over time. We're not going to cut it off and disappear because we want to have your responses and your insights and your advice and suggestions. And so I'll get right to the one. I wanted to make sure everybody could get the copy of that book that they need.
Going over time is my fault. I talk too much. I know that.
We appreciated it, though. There was a lot of richness there, and I think it's pioneering a new path in the United States for Native American ministry. So let me do a few questions that are here, and then Alyssa and Ray and Sue have a few announcements, and then we're going to stay and keep dealing with questions and responses and suggestions from different people. One from Margaret Lauder, Father Mike, is, are the U.S. bishops opposing the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian School Boarding Policies Act? And if so, yes, or is it yes, or are they not?
Yeah, this might seem like a cop out, but the Subcommittee of Native American Affairs, we have different roles here at the USCSB. We're kind of stratified. Are the Subcommittee of Native American Affairs, we don't make policy statements. So therefore, we have never talked about or to say this is a good bill and this is a bad bill, because it's really not our role. We can advise, and we do a lot of advising, but the role that says this is a good bill, this is something we recommend, or this is something we do not recommend, is our government affairs. And they have their own committee of bishops to decide what they're going to support and what they're not going to support. I have advised them. I've talked about this bill. I've done some background. The Jesuits have also given some great background, which I've sent over to that committee, And so far, they have not decided to support the bill or not support it. So that's the official position of our Roman Catholic Church. But it's the government affairs that will make that decision eventually down the road. But I think they're still looking at it. They're still studying about it. They do have some concerns about it, and we're trying to work through their concerns. But they're the ones who will make the final recommendation.
Okay, well, here's a few structural and policy questions. I'll put a couple of them together. Peter Koenig has one. Are we still trying to get Native Americans to fit within our model, to own land, build your own home, get a job? Is that what they are really asking for? And his other question is, how do we work with mainstream Catholic parishes to educate us to this mission and to gain a right relationship with Native communities?
The first question first. Native communities are very different. Some have the idea that they will hold everything in common. Some Native communities want that American dream of having a house and a car and a dog and 3.5 children. So it really depends on your Native communities. There are some aspects of Native poverty that are common that we try to work with as the USCCB and the Committee of Domestic Peace and Justice. We're working hand in hand with them and trying to find out ways that we can address certain poverty issues. But when it comes to specific concerns with Native communities, they're all over the board, all over the map in terms of what they want. But the only thing we can do is there's some national things that we can work on that are very important. Specifically talking about funds and money and banking, we're working with CCHD and trying to find different aspects or different ways to get funds and banking toward Native communities so they don't rely upon land as collateral. So we're doing a lot of work with that, with Native CDFIs is what we're trying to increase.
Well, here's a question before we get on to the educating parishes. It's kind of connected to this. Brooke Reggio asks, there's challenges for a bank loan and it's a result of historical and ownership policies imposed on Native communities. It's an example of structural racism. But what do you see as other most significant policies and existing laws that continue to support structural racism?
Yeah, you're going to get me in trouble and fired here. I think there's a lot of endemic racism. There's a lot of subtle racism. I think there's a number of laws, and again, domestic peace and justice can go more into that. But I think my concern is you can remove all laws you want. And just talking for myself, just growing up, I visited the South on occasion, and I remember growing up in Mobile, Alabama, there is whites only in terms of bathrooms and drinking fountains. All those laws are removed. However, and I don't want to speak to some of my relatives, but there are people who still have racist ideas. So you move all laws you want, but if you don't deal with racist ideology, then you're not going to get anywhere. And something I had on my notes that I didn't say is that as an example of that, when I was working on the Navajo Nation, I was working with a good friend of mine, Eric Begay, who's Navajo, and he's has a long ponytail and a big up truck and stuff like that. And we had to do some things outside the reservation, get some supplies in Farmington down the road outside the reservation. And I remember coming back, the cop came in right behind us as a county sheriff, and he put on his lights and he pulled us over. And I thought, wow, this is rather strange because Eric wasn't doing anything wrong. He wasn't speeding or anything like that. And the cop got out of his car, shined his flashlight in Eric's eyes, asked for his ID, and then went over to my side, maybe rolled down the window, shined the light in my eyes, asked for my ID, went back to his car, and came back and threw our IDs back in our laps and said, okay, you can go. And they rolled up the window and we went. And I was just surprised that would happen. I asked Eric, and Eric said, that happens all the time on this road. And I said, it shouldn't. It's the first time I've ever been pulled over driving while Navajo. That's endemic racism, people's thoughts and ideas. And if we don't address that, if we don't do that, then we can move all the laws we want, but then we can't drive down this road without being pulled over and hassled by the county sheriff. So I think that's important. And the Pastoral, Open Wire Hearts, makes that point that racism is a learned behavior. We're not automatic racists. That we have to learn that every single generation, and we can combat it by just getting the word out. So again, that's important.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we're
Listen-
talking about education.
Yeah, why don't we get Ray and Sue to tell us about the Indigenous ministry on our website, and then we'll get back to that question. But this might answer some of the questions anyway. So Ray and Sue, do you want to do that?
Sure. Alyssa, would you please put up a picture of the website showing the main menu up top? All right. And hello again. This is our AHP website. And if you will look very carefully, I know it's kind of small on my picture here, but there's an Indigenous Ministry 101 section, which Alyssa is now pointing to with her cursor. This has been developed by our members of our committee in order to give new practitioners in working with and serving Native people a quick resource section in order to get started, especially when you're working with no background whatsoever. There are two things there. One is a book of, Alyssa's clicking on the tips for working in Native ministry. That is a list compiled mainly by our colleague, Deacon Larry Duchesne, and it is a guide to new folks who are working with Native people to be culturally sensitive. It's what we've learned to do and what we have learned not to do, essentially. And it is a way, we hope, of suggestions to help people to work humbly among Native people, recognize that we're human, and maybe they can learn some of the things and avoid some of the pitfalls that we personally made mistakes with. The second section, Alyssa, if you would please click on, is the book section. Yes, essential reading is currently a list of 11 books with links to Amazon. It's on a wide range of things from Native culture, from a Native perspective, to theological information, to testimonies of those of us in Native ministry who have tried to pass on the baton to the next generation by showing what we've learned, and some helpful information in books on recovery from trauma if you're a pastor, clergy, religious, or lay ministers. In other words, we wanted people to be able to go straight there, find something quick and easy to get to with the 101 basics. And they are indeed a work in progress, so they will likely be updated at some point. Thank you. Now, Alyssa, back to you.
Thank you, Ray and Sue. So I'm Alyssa. I just wanted to say before I continue that I chose to wear my traditional Native regalia today in honor of my grandfather, who was a member of the boarding schools in Canada. So our next webinar, we don't have a date quite yet for it, but it'll be about the Pine Ridge School that is now called Mapialuta, which means red cloud in Lakota. It's I'm putting a website in the chat that will give you more information about that. It's got a list of schools, 8 schools in the network that that are hosted by the University of Notre Dame that have information on it. I'm realizing that I didn't write my notes very well.
Oh, but you know what? We could have Will Newkirk just say hi he's head of those Native American Catholic boarding schools. Just say a quick word, Will, so people can be in touch with you and know what you're doing, because it's a wonderful ministry.
Yeah, thanks everyone. We're excited to have a conversation with just like Alyssa said, Mapialuta Red Cloud, one of our 8 Native American Catholic schools serving the Lakota Sioux people in Pine Ridge. And our work at Notre Dame and the American Indian Catholic Schools Network involves providing professional formation, community, college access resources, and research around Indigenous Catholic schools today. And we look to have a conversation to kind of shed light on what a network of today's Native Catholic schools look like, as well as the stories within those schools. So like I said, we're the American Indian Catholic Schools Network. I'll type in another link that can go even potentially quicker to our website. But we'll like to have you learn more, and then looking forward to continuing the conversation. So thanks. Great to be everyone here, and thanks for the great conversation today.
Hey, thanks, Will. Now we can go back to another question for Father Mike, and if anybody else, if they have any suggestions about this. It's again Peter Koenig. How do we work with mainstream Catholic parishes to educate us to this mission and to gain a right relationship with Native communities? And Ray and Sue did say, please check our website, but there's a lot more to say about it. So Father Mike, do you want to take that on?
Yeah, I would say check the website. It's a very good website. Same with my website at the USCCP. Just go where it says offices and click on that, offices and secretariats, go to Native American, and then I have a lot of very good information about it, especially the past documents of our Roman Catholic Church. But throughout my presentation, I'm making sure that you know that this little book here is the book of the Roman Catholic Church, and especially of the bishops. Of course, as I talked about before, getting the dialogue with Native communities and make sure you know what they want, but then make an appointment with your bishop or archbishop and bring this little document with you, and of course, underline it, highlight it, all the things you want to say, and especially the back here has my 17 issues, and then say, hey, bishop, archbishop, this is your document. This is what you want to do. Okay, so again, how do we, with your lay people or your religious or priest, how do we implement this document? And the USCCP, my office, Father Mike Carson, will allow or help you do whatever you need to do to implement this document. The most important part is this is the document of the Roman Catholic Church. This is a document of the bishops. So when the bishops start arguing about it, say, hey, no, this is your statement. And that means that you have a commitment to implement it. That's why you voted for it. If you didn't vote for it, it's still a document of the Roman Catholic Church. So therefore, how are you going to implement it in your own diocese or archdiocese? We're not just talking about diocese with reservations. As I said before in our presentation, most natives live in large cities. So it's also a document for large cities to implement it. So again, first and foremost, dialogue with your local native communities, but then take this little document with you as you make an appointment with your bishop and archbishop and ask how to implement it in your diocese or archdiocese.
Mm-hmm. I see that we have several people here that are involved in Native American ministry. Would any of you like to say how you would bring this to your Native American community? Since many of us do live in urban areas and we're not around Native Americans. I see there's Deacon Roy, there's Deacon Larry, there's Victor Cancino, maybe a couple of other people, if you'd like to comment.
Oh, sure, I'd be glad to. So, as part of actually bringing this out to the parishes, we're coming up here, at least in the Diocese of Charleston, South Carolina, is an implementation plan. So we have the framework, and we have the needs of the various tribes within South Carolina. A Diocese of Charleston is the entire state of South Carolina. So now we're looking at the starting point, the web pages of the different tribes here in South Carolina, and cross-referencing what's on their web pages for information needs, documents, newsletters, or publications, comparing that to the pastoral framework and looking for synergies and also things for disconnects or gap analysis. So at least that's what we're doing here at this diocese. Thank you, Margaret.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else would like to add something?
Yeah, I can jump in. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
We can see you too.
So Victor Cancino, or Father Victor Cancino, Jesuit on in Flathead Indian Reservation in Western Montana among the Salish and the Kootenai and the Pend d'Oreille. And we, through the inspiration of Kevin, who works with young adults in the Diocese of Helena, he brought up he had a bunch of copies of the document, and we thought, well, let's begin a conversation. So I begin at the parish and just kind of brainstorm and host a dinner and see where it goes. And even came up with a really creative idea of just getting young Native adults, and hearing their voices. And I thought of like who could be involved in that conversation. But I introduced it to my pastoral council, and it seemed a little bit rushed. And then there was one member who is native, who had a very strong reaction. Actually triggered her into a kind of a bit of trauma, especially when I mentioned that we wanted to hear the voices of the youth, of kids. And she went into this protective mode of wanting to protect her child, who we have a close relationship with in the church, but just became very protective of her and the youth in general, and not wanting to separate the voices from the youth without the elders. But basically was kind of triggered just by initiating a simple conversation. But and I think, reflecting on it, I think the mistake on my part was understanding the situation on my reservation, or on our reservation, and the history there, and where the community is. And it's not in a good place right now. And the second point of that reflection is everything has to be native led. Even the thought of have a conversation about healing, it can't necessarily come from the pastor or for the church. It has to come from the native community, at least from my reservation.
Mm-hmm. Could you just say a little bit more about why she wouldn't want the young people to talk? Since we're trying to get them to be more articulate and be able to stand up for who they are and things.
Well, I think, I mean, I don't know. I'd have to have her speak for herself. We had a conversation about it. I think it has to do with the idea that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So all the intentions are great about this, but I think it triggered something. It triggered something about a historical trauma and maybe abuse in her own family, and just becoming overly protective and incredibly protective of her child and the children.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, not yes, you want to let the kids have agency and have their voice, which is just that's what we want, and there's venues for that. But in this case, I think she was thinking we're going to enter into a complicated conversation, and she doesn't trust that the intentions are all for the protection of kids. She's thinking that this is an interest of the diocese to convert.
Oh, is she a practicing Catholic, or is she?
She's on the yes, she is, but she's one day she is, and the next day she isn't, so she goes back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for sharing that. Renee, would you like to say what you do in your Kateri circle? In
Sure.
Raleigh?
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much. Good to be with you. Yes. So in the Diocese of Raleigh, we have 8 state recognized tribes and 1 federal recognized tribe, and that's the Eastern Band of Cherokee. So this whole year, we've been kind of building up this ministry from the ground up, basically. So we've been having these Kateri circles virtually. That way we can allow for many people to attend. And the structure of that is basically we have usually a discussion about some kind of Native American and Catholic theology. So we might talk about St. Kateri herself or Nicholas Black Elk. And then we do usually a communal discussion where a Native member will share about their experiences and their tradition and their tribe. And then at some point we'll open up a forum for people to talk about what's going on in their lives or a topic of interest. And then recently we've been having guest speakers. So Deacon Larry was with us, I think last month, or no, the month before. He was great. So he was going over the pastoral framework with us. And tonight we're going to have Ginny Black Bear. She's the director of religious education at St. Francis. So we're very excited to have her. So people are welcome to come. I know it's like last minute, but you're welcome to join us tonight at 7 Eastern time. So we will be on, and we look forward to having anyone there.
That's great, Renee. Thank you. So anybody could copy that down and participate. Anybody else want to respond or ask a question? Give a suggestion? I think it's going to be a challenge to promote this in urban areas where it's mostly white parishioners. Except that Pope Francis has asked us to reach out, enlarge our tent, and get to know our brothers and sisters from all over the world and all ethnic backgrounds. Deacon Roy, while we have you here, could you want to tell us what you're doing in Oklahoma? Or what your challenges might be? I don't know. Whoops, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, my wife and I have a ministry, the American Indian Catholic Outreach in Oklahoma. I'm not assigned to any particular diocese. Both bishops here, we have an archbishop in Oklahoma City and a bishop in Tulsa. And they thought it would be best if I'm not assigned. That way my wife and I can travel whenever we see the opportunity. We go to powwows all over Oklahoma and set up tables, give away Catholic literature, Bibles, rosaries, and of course we both dance. I do the gourd dancing and she does shawl dancing. So you can't just sit there and watch it happening. And we've got to meet so many people. We've been doing it since 2014, I think it is. So we know a lot of people on the powwow trail, and they're always welcoming us. But getting back to the book that you were talking about, the implementation of that book in Oklahoma is going to be very difficult. We have 39 tribes here. So when you're trying to implement it in one way with one tribe, it doesn't work that way with another tribe. So, and Father Carson is aware of this. I think during the last 2 years, my wife and I did listening sessions throughout Oklahoma at various parishes about when it happened at Kamloops about the supposedly discovery of the graves.
Yes.
And eventually grew into a Oklahoma Native Catholic boarding school, not conference, but what's the exact name of it, Susan? Oklahoma Native Boarding School Coalition, I guess it is. Yeah, and there's been a book written, I put it in the chat, by Brian Reinflish concerning our listening sessions that we did throughout Oklahoma. And he's a professor at Marquette University, history professor. He researched all the schools in Oklahoma. And we had, if I'm not mistaken, I think we had 93 schools at one time. States, it was tribal schools, federal schools, individuals ran schools. And we have two right now, the Riverside Indian School and Sequoia Indian School here in Tahlequah, where we live. But back to the book, trying to take that to 39 different tribes, it's there's a lot in that book to try to implement with the various tribes. And we've sent out letters to tribes, all 39 tribes, and got very few responses from the tribal leaders. And we're sending out another letter with the books that were written by Brian Reinflish. And what we're discovering here in Oklahoma is we'll take care of ourselves. We don't need you to step in and be too involved, I guess you could say. And we're trying to get the message across that we're not here to tell you what to do as a church. We're here to ask how we can assist you in what we're promoting. We'll see how that plays out. We didn't have any response last time from the tribal leaders, but we'll see how that pans out.
So Deacon Roy, are these people mostly Catholics? Are they mixed? Are they non-practicing or practicing?
There are very few Catholic Native Americans in Oklahoma.
Okay.
The Osage probably have more Catholics than anyone, and they had to fight to keep their Catholic faith. With the government wanted them to be Quaker when the Grant Peace Policy came in. But yeah, there's very few Catholics, which doesn't make it any easier. I mean, you have Catholic leadership coming in to say, "Hey, how can we assist you?" And there's a bit of animosity towards Catholics in Oklahoma from the Native people.
Roy, you're spot on. I get that from my own family. My father practiced in a Native church, and when he married my mother, who was Irish Catholic, they thought that was the worst thing in the world, and they still, don't recognize Catholics, at least in my tribe.
Yeah.
Most of my family's out there in Calumet and Gary, and
It's the same way here in Tahlequah. I'm Cherokee. My wife's Choctaw, and this is the capital of the Cherokee Nation, Tahlequah. And to give you, for instance, we were at a faith formation conference a couple of months ago, and a gentleman we know from one of the local parishes works for Cherokee Nation, and he mentioned one day at work that he was Catholic, and he said it was like silence in the room, no more conversation, and just he's really felt like he's been shunned.
Yeah, my father's side, which is a Native side, thinks my dad was kidnapped and brainwashed because he was a convert, So they're still not happy with it. I still hear remarks almost every time I'm there, and I do spend an awful lot of time in Oklahoma, but it is a very difficult.
Yeah, it's hard. Most of the people we deal with are not Catholic when we go to the powwows, but that hasn't stopped them from making us feel very welcome. And I wear a cassock and collar, and when I gourd dance, I don't know if everyone knows what a gourd dance is. I wear the regalia for a gourd dance, and that's open doors.
Well, there's challenges on both sides. Father Mike, there's a question for all of us, but don't we have to convert white Catholics as much as building bridges with Native Americans? And as you've been working with white priests and pastors, that's a challenge for all of us if the pastor wants to accept something new or new teaching or new training.
Yeah, well, the short answer is yes, we're all open and all have a need for conversion, all of us. And if we're there, if we arrived, and then we'll all be angels. So yes, I think, especially with Native people, pastors or priests working in Native churches, most of them are open to the idea of how best to work with their Native communities. A lot of them are saying, I do not know how to do that. Please inform me and please help me out. So I work with my office, and that's what the pastoral framework tries to do, is give them some basic information and tell them how to do that. But in my experience for the last 8 years, although there has been some difference, but I think most pastors, most priests are welcome to the idea that they need to learn how to work with their Native communities, because most pastors, most priests want to do the best they can, and they can't do that unless they're intercultural competent. Even those who are come from Africa or India or the Philippines, and they find themselves in a very different culture, they're open to that possibility, which is very important. But again, we as a church have to make sure they have that the material or ways to do that, and the best way to do that. So the short answer is yes.
I just remember growing up on the people of a certain age, which some of us on this webinar are, and you watch the Saturday morning kid shows like Hopalong Cassidy or Zorro or whatever, but you always saw the white man was the victor, and when Indians get killed. And as a kid, I have to admit, growing up, I didn't feel bad when the Indians were killed because I grew up from such a young age in that culture. I had no consideration. And I think that some of that is like you're talking about, Father Mike and Demick, in the white community. We were brainwashed before we knew it. And it takes branching out. I guess we can all recall our memories of growing up and what different groups were okay and which groups weren't. Maybe since we have Father Aaron Rafferty from Collegeville, you could comment on how your community looks at intercultural things and Native American ministry, and what obstacles or what positive things are happening at the Benedictines.
Well, yes, and I'm a cultural anthropologist, so this is very interesting discussion for me. We ran a Native American industrial school here at St. John's Abbey from 1885 to 1896. And there were boys that ranged in age from about 7 to 14 that attended the school. Some of these boys were buried. They died, and during their schooling here, they were buried in our cemetery. And we have just finished repatriating 4 of those bodies back to the White Earth Nation in northern Minnesota. We are also actively involved right now in a larger repatriation effort involving also our sister community of St. Benedict's down the road here in central Minnesota. And we're involved in an extensive repatriation and reparation, some initiatives. We have collected over the years many artifacts from these communities where our former priests were doing their parish ministries. And so we're in the midst of this repatriation and reparation procedure right now. And it's very complicated, very delicate. As an anthropologist and also from someone who's been very involved in interreligious dialogue in East Asia, I know that these are extremely sensitive issues and have to be approached very, very carefully. And I agree very much with the people here who have been talking about we have to allow the people themselves to take the direction they wish to take with this issue. Because I've discovered that any interference on our part looks as though we're somehow trying to control the situation. And that comes across as a very negative thing, and we're not trying to do that at all. But that's kind of where we're at right now in our efforts.
Thanks for sharing with us. Appreciate it. Anybody else?
I'd like to share what we're doing in Anchorage, the city of Anchorage. We work ecumenically with, it started with Methodist Church, who is connected to Alaska Pacific University. And then they actually hired a local pastor who grew up in Sitka, but also a Methodist pastor that went out to Oklahoma and learned their language, Kawa, and worked with. So we're working with a program called Triumph Over Drama. So it's a 7-week program, and we trained the facilitators, 10 of them, and we did the second one this past week. And now we're going to just meet twice a week. And we'll just have, it's called healing circles, talking circles. We're using that process. The program itself started in Africa. A Methodist deacon, a woman deacon, had an experience in Nigeria. There was a war going on, and then the women were violated. So she started that program, and then it came in 2022 to US, and she met a psychologist that worked with an addiction program, Tamar, with the prisoners. So, and this woman, a psychologist or psychiatrist, did a 30-day working with the prisoners. So they came together and brought it down to 7 weeks. So, and it has a Native American supplement, a Jewish religion, sacrament, and Muslim. And so, and we had a panel when we first started the 7 weeks in September with Friends or Quaker and with the head of their heads of their churches, I guess. They're both women, and the other one was Presbyterian. And then it's a boarding school project. And then I was asked, I'm on the board for Carl Newman Professorship Foundation. So the the professor of that program asked me if I could meet with Pastor Murray Crooks, who we got together and decided I should be in it. But I'm kind of not connected with the Archdiocese of Anchorage for my own reasons. I won't discuss it with your group. So, but we're in a process trying to work with a parish that will, I think, use this document to have a reason to come together, and we're going to he'll somehow connect with Archbishop, and then maybe his parish is inviting us to study the document together. So this was very important that I'm involved with your presentation. So, and then those two, mostly the Quakers or Friends and the Presbyterian already have reconciliation with their general church in what they did in Alaska, especially in Southeast, where I had worked for 10 years. And Macaw Blackout came up, and we went down and talked with a Presbyterian parish there. And then the other Quaker, they're already doing, those two churches are more ahead of us, the Catholics in Archdiocese in Anchorage. So they're setting up like healing family groups, Quakers, because of what they did with one of the villages in Southeast I used to visit. They were very fundamentalists, and so they're implementing about what they had done, reparation process, and then in Juneau, the Presbyterian Church, they had a Tlingit pastor that was asked to remove from their parish or their congregation and build another one. So they did that reparation. But our speaker was from the head of the religious studies and the Carlin professorship chair, who grew up, who had a lot of degrees from Florida Catholic University. It was he has a family here, and he represented the document and tried to present it to the group that came. And I think he had no history, very little history about the Christian history up here in Alaska. I'm on the Catholic side. The other two did. So it's slow. So we're working on it.
Yeah, you're doing it. Thank you for sharing what's happening in Alaska with us. I think I'll just give Father Mike the last word. I would like to encourage you to be in touch with us, give your suggestions and recommendations. Come to our next webinar. If you have ideas, maybe we should just have a discussion on ministry and how we promote this. We could do a webinar on that and just have a general discussion, like the Synod in Rome. We could have this big round table and learn from everybody. But
Yeah.
I know we're over time. Thanks for staying.
May I offer something, please?
Yes.
My name is Kiara Raven. I'm in the Archdiocese of Seattle in Washington State. My people are from the Fond du Lac tribe in northern Minnesota. My father was Native. I feel called to share that in our Archdiocese in August, a terrible and destructive misstep happened using this book, Keeping Christ's Sacred Promise. What happened was that we have a Native Catholic Advisory Board at our Archdiocese that has been in effect for at least 35 years, maybe a little bit more. I've been on that board for 25 years, and I know there's other people on this webinar today who have been advisors, Native advisors. What happened to us in August was this sacred document was used in a way to dissolve our Native Advisory Board. It was brought in and it said that they wanted to redirect Native ministry to refocus it. Our focus has been on working very hard with our archdiocese and our deacon and inviting Father Michael Carson to come and speak to our Archbishop and to give a webinar at through our Archdiocese. That was in 2022. And what has happened is they dissolved us, the board of 8-9 people, because we kept focusing on boarding schools, because we kept asking, bringing Father Carson, asking, trying to teach that until we, as an archdiocese, focus on the boarding schools and we move through that together. We as natives can't heal, and our church in the United States cannot heal. And we have put that forward in a very, very, what we thought was a productive way, by bringing Father Carson, by asking for help, by doing presentations ourselves amongst our sister church that is with us. I go to St. Paul on the Swinomish Indian Reservation. So we have reached out as natives to teach our non-native brothers and sisters in our sister church about the boarding schools. And when we did that, and when we worked with the St. James Cathedral to bring a likeness of St. Kateri Tekakwitha into our archdiocese, since it is our archdiocese that put forward to bring sainthood to St. Kateri, we just felt that there should be a likeness of her in there. What we were asked is that, are we working independently of the advisory board, or do we really want to be a part? And it was like, as we take steps to bring forward the history of the boarding schools and to ask for healing. No, we don't ask, we beg. We were dissolved so that they could go find nicer natives. And so we are seeking now to heal from that, because whatever relationship our churches had with this archdiocese has been destroyed.
Yeah, I can hear
And
that.
this sacred document was used as the means to say, we want to refocus. And I can't see what they're refocusing from. We were given a 5-year plan that they wanted us to agree to, that did not, in 5 years, it did not once bring up the topic of boarding schools.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, huh?
No, it's devastating. It's
Yes,
not
it is.
unfortunate, it's devastating. And it is unconscionable.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I usually don't say anything, but
It broke your heart. You feel bad. We feel your pain to be
and I
diminished.
know there's others on here
Mm-hmm.
in this webinar that were there and experienced the same abandonment from the church again, the same marginalization of the church again. And yet we have stuck with this church to bring healing from the boarding schools.
Mm-hmm.
And their inability to step forward and be accountable. The way they deal with it is to use a sacred document that gave us so much hope.
Yeah.
To use it to silence us. And so I am sorry for bringing this Debbie Downer to it, but this document can be used in so many different ways.
Well, it's not going to stop you though, because
Obviously not, because I would have never said anything, and I just felt something come in me and said, we cannot allow ourselves to be silenced again as natives. I don't care how big the organization, who is in charge. We cannot lose our voice.
No, that's true.
Kara, I just want to say that, please don't feel sorry that you brought it up. This is to listen, the caring and the compassion, and also the realization of truth and reconciliation that we want to hear. I don't have any answers for you. I didn't know about the situation. I fully affirm and believe what you're saying. I can see it in your face and your heart. I can really offer now is that you've been heard, you've been listened to, and we care about you very, very deeply. And we're here now as a team to help in that healing process. So I don't have any answers for you, but we'll walk the journey with you.
Mm-hmm. We sure will. And I think that's God's presence in your life, that you see the beauty of the document, that you're not throwing everything out.
No.
Because it's your church too, even if they don't recognize the part you're playing in it. So thank you for sharing with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So there's Mark Leopold, thank you for the informative presentation, for all your sharing. We have so much work to do to live up to the promise of our faith. I especially appreciate the voice that Kiara brings to the sense of abandonment of our Native Catholics. Thank you, Mark, for sharing that with us. And thank you all for staying over and for staying longer. And maybe this is what we do have to do, what Deacon Larry was talking about, helping each other to heal. And we should just have a chance for us to share stories, positive and negative. Marjorie, do you want to say something before we close?
Oh, I just am grateful for Kiara. I think that's where the conversation really needs to be. That is what, and I kept wondering, where are the Native people in this, a conversation today too? And I'm happy for those who were there and spoke, but I wondered how many were involved in the document itself and preparing it. Maybe they were there. I may have been said and I missed it, but I know I was having some gut level reactions to a number of things. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
But Kiara, and I hope I'm saying your name right. If I'm not, please let me know. Thank you for asking, Margaret.
Oh, you're welcome. So Father Mike, do you want to have the last word? Because it was a beautiful document that you worked on for so long, and it's going to really be a cornerstone of ministry going forward.
Yeah, just not me, but an army of others, including many Native leadership. I just wanted to point out that I am advised of the situation in the Archdiocese of Washington, Seattle, Washington. Jerry keeps me advised almost every day, and we've talked a lot of hours about this situation, and more importantly, what to do with it. So my heart goes out to you. But the document itself, it's weaved throughout the document that the most important thing, the single most important thing is dialogue, is conversation with the bishops, with the Native leadership and Native communities in general. And then if somebody goes against that, and then it goes against the document, so let's keep in mind. Also, I'm here to help for those who want to make a pastoral plan for your diocese, archdiocese, or even for your Native community. Send me an email, and we can use the pastoral framework to do that. So that becomes very, very important. And I'll just, how about if I just do a closing prayer here, Margaret?
Okay, that's good.
Okay. In the name of the Father, and the Son, Holy Spirit. Bless you, Lord our God. We give you thanks for this time of gathering. We ask you hope and healing in what we do as a Roman Catholic Church. We pray for the bishops and for their wisdom, that they see Native ministry and Native peoples as a value, an important gift they are to our church. We ask your blessing upon all of us as we go forward, both in terms of social justice, but in terms of dialogue with our church. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Good job.
Thanks, everybody. We
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you next
God
time.
bless. Appreciate it.
Yeah, AHP team, stay here for a little bit.
Sounds good.